Welcome back to the Sustainable Creator Podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Lyndon.
We are business coaches for creatives, aka we have the best job ever. It truly is so freaking fun. We love to nerd out about all things offers and marketing and launch strategy and using data to make better decisions. Like those are just some of the fun rabbit holes we love to go down with clients. And we've been working together for 5 years now, which is wild to say out loud. And we thought it would be fun to do a special episode. It's going to be a bit niche, but there are a few of you who worked with your partner in business or who want to. And so we wanted to just do 5 things that we have learned by working together for the past 5 years that would be helpful for other couples to know if that is something that you are interested in, or if you just want to listen to get to know us more, that's cool too. So that's the vibe of today's podcast, and we're glad that you're here. Starting with
one of the first things that we learned when we think about year one, like this is the most common question of like, what is it like to start working together? We didn't properly onboard.
No, not at all. There was that was non-existent.
If I think about the first week after I left corporate and I was working with Joe, in the first month we traveled, I think 10 or almost half of the month, 10 days or almost half of the month. We hosted a workshop with members. We onboarded 2 new coaching clients. We tried to do a full ClickUp build out in that first month.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that is interesting is I had spent years almost daily talking to Joe about the business and being an advisor, an external consultant. And being external is very different than being internal. And so while I conceptually understood a lot, I didn't necessarily know how things worked. And so everything that I tried to do when I was onboarding to a business she had run for 5, 6 years at that point was I had to go back and, hey, how do I do this? Or where should I find this? Or what am I doing?
Yeah. And then you had the flip side to that too, because on the other side of things, I had been running a business for, I don't know, at least 5, 6, 7 years at that point, probably. I would have to go back and fact check that, but it had been a hot minute that I had been running things on my own. And so a lot of it was very just intuitive at that point where I knew exactly what needed to get done. I had my rhythms, my processes, but they weren't documented. And so you had Lyndon on one side just diving straight into the deep end going, okay, what like help me solve these things here, and me learning how to work with someone as a partner in business for the first time and how to communicate all over again and being like, what do you mean you don't know how to do that? So it was a very fun time. And that is the very first thing we always recommend. If you are someone who wants to work with your spouse, your friends, your brother, whoever, like someone who is close to you, we'll get into like roles and responsibilities. That's a whole other thing. Get clear on that, but also have some type of onboarding because there's going to be more that you need to walk them through than you realize. And having that margin, that space to be able to not rush through it, but just sit in it and have some time to be able to answer their questions, make sure they understand everything. That is so helpful.
So a couple of ways that we suggest for people to do an onboarding like this. Like the standard traditional corporate route is plan a week where you sit down and you walk through of like, these are how systems works. These are how we onboard clients. This is how we deliver. This is our SOPs. This is where you find all the things. Oh, and you get an email address. And here's your work laptop. And it feels very corporate, but that would actually have been really helpful for me.
Yeah.
If you don't have standardized processes yet, or you don't have everything documented, the other really good option that we've seen work for people is the idea of body doubling. So instead of telling people this is the process, you just dedicate the first couple weeks. You're going to do everything together, and it's going to feel pretty weird, but it's when I do this thing, you're going to sit right next to me and see how I go through all of these steps, which is basically in process, you're teaching the SOPs of your company. And so you body double through a couple weeks of doing the thing. And so me onboarding, I would have had zero output as a employee or owner in those two 2-3 weeks of body doubling, but that would have then had me leaving at the end of that of like, oh, I know where we keep these files. I know how we structure this type of email we're sending back to someone.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to do, because I have sat side by side doing the same thing. And so now I get it from just like an observational way. And then we think about that in a kind of like a structured of like, you do it, we do it, I do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the first week, you like the person that teaching would do it, and then you kind of do it together. And then the person that was teaching now watches as a way of cycling through that process is how I would advise people, and the advice I give most people thinking about doing this transition.
Yeah. At just bottom line, give yourself some grace if you are going this route, and be willing to sit in that with your partner to be able to answer their questions, go through things, make sure they really understand it. Because one thing I really had to learn, because I think this applies to a lot of founders and creatives who are very used to doing things on their own, is that it is hard to explain what you know really well to someone else. And I found myself during that first week of working together, when Lyndon would ask me a question, I would be like, I'll just do it. It'll just be really like a lot quicker for me to just do it, and you can do something else. And Lyndon, bless him, it was really in being like, okay, so I know you can do it, but also I need you to remember that if you take a little extra time with me right now, it will save so much time in the long run, because you won't have to be the one doing it anymore. And so it feels like it's taking longer right now, but ultimately you are saving a lot of time in the long run. So that was really helpful for me, and is just a really good reminder for anyone listening here as well.
I think about the next thing. So lesson 2 that we learned is roles and responsibilities is not just a corporate thing.
No.
The thing that we ran into problems with next, after we figured out onboarding, I was up to speed, we started running into assigning tasks, but not assigning ownership or responsibility. And so what this kind of looks like is we would have informal meetings, we would talk about things, and it was like, oh, can you do these couple things? And then I'll do these couple things. And as someone joining, that didn't feel like I necessarily had authority to do things or ownership. And there wasn't really a who actually has the final say on this, because we've structured us as working together as partners. We're fairly equal on things. We want to agree on things. But when it was just like, can you email that person and I will email this person, it's who owns client communication.
Right.
And that took us longer than I would like to admit to realize we actually need to write job descriptions and say, you own these parts of the business and you own those parts of the business. And you make decisions over there and I make decisions over there. And if you want to dabble in the other person's space, you have to ask them.
And shocker, once we got clear on that, we worked even better together. Who would have thought? So it can be really helpful. The one thing I will say here, though, is that check in with whoever your partner is that you are thinking about wanting to work together on, or if you currently are, to just get clear on, is this even something that they want to be doing? You know, I'm not even talking about working together in general. I'm talking about the role that you think they would be really good at. If you're automatically wanting to assign them a role, check in with them to see if, one, that's something they even want to do, because sometimes it's not, and that can't determine, how things are mapped out accordingly. So just check in with that. That's just like a good rule of thumb in general.
I think for us, once we started using a formalized process, like when I was in corporate or grad school, I learned about the project management framework, or the idea of a RACI chart, which is basically when you are working with teams, you go through like a 4-part thing and you assign every person one of the 4 letters. It's an acronym, RACI, which stands for responsible, accountable, consult, or inform. And so basically for everything on a project, we use it for our business. You then look at like, Joe is responsible for this. Lyndon needs to be consulted on this. This, you only need to be informed. You're not even involved in the process. Just once it happens, just let them know it happened. And so if I think about that tangibly of the business that we have today, we have a membership. I am responsible for all of the admin of that, all of the customer support, all of the onboarding, like scheduling, and Joe is basically informed because that day to day falls under my wheelhouse.
Yeah, we show up for calls together. We both show up on onboarding calls with members together. But like all of the nitty gritty things, that's Lyndon's wheelhouse, which I don't think we said that our zones, like our roles and responsibilities. Did we say that?
No.
Okay, so Lyndon is operations, the business side of things, and anything else? Am I missing anything?
I'm sure you are, but keep going.
And then for me, it's largely a marketing and launch strategy and like the creative direction. So it works really well because that ties into this RACI chart that Lyndon is walking through.
But where that gets granular and actually doing a chart where you break it out on almost a task level becomes really helpful is Joe does all the marketing. So if you see something go up on Instagram, Joe probably did it. She had ownership. I was probably not even consulted. Like, it just went up. Like, cool. I sometimes see cool reels that we put up and I'm excited about them. But there's a pretty good chance that you got a DM from me because we're both responsible for DMs because I am a lot of customer support of also a large part of our sales process flows through Lyndon.
Yeah.
And so while you can't draw the line like clearly on the platform because there's parts of our business that exist on my side of the fence or Joe's side of the fence, or we both own them. And then there's like, both of us are responsible. And like calls is a perfect example of that. We're both responsible for showing up as coaches on calls because that is both of our responsibility and it's shared.
Yeah.
But the more things that you can remove shared responsibility from, the quicker you can move as a team. Yeah.
At this point, we can really divide and conquer. And granted, yes, we've worked together for 5 years at this point. We now have our routines, our rhythms. We mind meld a little bit, which is really, really helpful. So we put in a lot of work to get here, but all of that made a really, really big difference. The last thing I will say in this category is make sure that you are also setting those expectations with your clients. So for instance, when Lyndon came on, there was a transition into letting all of our clients know Lyndon is someone who you will hear back from in emails, responses, getting you all set up because part of his role includes the client communication. And I would still have clients reaching out directly to me because that was what they were used to. And I had to learn to point them back to Lyndon and either say, Lyndon is going to take care of that for you, or I've told Lyndon about this. In the future, you can reach out to him for anything, like he's handling client communication now. And everyone was super respectful. They got it. It was not a problem at all. But it is really important to make sure that you are also setting those expectations with your clients so that they know what to expect as well.
And I think that brings us nicely into lesson 3. How do you communicate?
Oh my gosh.
This feels like you shouldn't have to talk about it, and it is shockingly important.
The irony is that you have to talk about it.
And you have to talk about how you talk about things.
You know, we talk a lot about how valuable and important communication is in relationships in general. When you decide to go into business together, you learn how to communicate all over again. And so it helps a lot to be good communicators and to check in with each other, but just give yourself some grace that it's going to have a learning curve of its own as well, because you're both learning as you go, learning what the other needs. Like in business is going to be different than in life. And so there's a few different ways that we've learned to work for us.
I like to think about this as like the simple basic questions. When do you communicate? Why do you communicate? How do you communicate? What do you communicate about? And so for us, like we think about weekly rhythms. We do Monday morning check-ins. Like if we don't do those, it's like an hour and a half meeting oftentimes for us. If we don't do that, we are kind of out of alignment for a lot of the week and things don't really happen as well because we have not aligned on our priorities for that week. That's how we kick off the week. If we think about daily rhythms, oftentimes in the morning, we will check in on certain things, but there's also boundaries of you can't communicate around certain work things outside of work hours because we also have to maintain our own relationship, which is a different lesson. We'll get into that in a bit. But in the daily, how do you actually ask questions? Like, what is the correct format for this? And for a long time, we had desks next to each other, and it was like, hey, can you help me on this?
Yeah.
Completely breaking each other's flow. Now we don't have desks in the same room. They're opposite ends of the house. We don't walk over and interrupt people, and
we're probably wearing headphones.
In our quiet house where we both wear noise canceling headphones, and we text each other a lot, like less than 50 feet away. We text throughout the day because text is an asynchronous form of communication that you can respond to when you can.
And there are times if we find that we're texting back and forth, a bunch will be like, we're just going to come into the other room and talk about this in person. So like that happens. But as a whole, that has helped us a ton so that we're able to be more focused, get into a flow state. It's a lot more productive. And so with any of this, like this is what has worked for us. Feel free to take an experiment with it, borrow what you want. If you're like, that would not work for me, you don't have to, so but that is definitely something that has made a big difference. The other thing is, I will say we do have some daily check-ins that just happen throughout the day because we have lunch together, and that's a good time to be able to check in on anything. We try to go on daily walks together if possible, and sometimes that ebbs or flows on whether or not we're checking in on business things. In certain seasons, we might be in more of a sprint. And so there's more that we need to check in on and just be on the same page about. But in other seasons, we're prioritizing walks as more relational, non-business talk. And so that ebbs and flows, but is another example of checking in throughout the day, which helps.
I think the last thing, not in our notes, I didn't write this down, but one of the things that like as we have built like the communication muscle, it's also how do we communicate externally? Because as we get more protective of our own focus blocks, we don't need to interrupt each other. We also do that with calls, and we've gone to A/B days for our calls where like Mondays and Wednesdays, we focus on our own things because it turns out we have a decent output of things on a weekly basis. And we need those creative blocks to do things like this, record podcasts. And then there's call days, which is Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And as we got more protective of how we communicate with each other, we got more protective of how we communicate externally to make sure we were able to hit those focus marks when we had the time to do that. And so if you're going through this, just like figure out where your focus blocks are, how you focus best, and how do you communicate to support those blocks to actually get the work done that you need to, instead of just hang out all day.
Yep, for sure.
Lesson number 4.
We've started to touch on this just a little bit, but prioritizing your relationship outside of work is so important. It's really easy to get into the thick of it when you are running a business together and everything becomes about the business and your goals and your clients and the direction you're going. And before you realize that, you have stopped prioritizing each other. And so we have a few things that we try to keep in place so that we are prioritizing our relationship outside of work. For one, weekends are off. We do not work on weekends. That is our time to be able to rest, recover, just have a life outside of work. and that's a really big deal for us. Evenings were clocked off. We try to, and this again is something that ebbs and flows depending on the season that we're in. But as a whole, typically after dinner is when we clock off. And there may be the occasional business idea that gets, blurted out, and we might talk about it for a few minutes, but then we're like, okay, let's actually segue into something else that's non-work.
So I think the thing that I will say that has been really helpful for us, like weekends and nights, the default switches to we're not going to do work things. And if the idea comes up, it's do you have capacity or are you okay talking about this thing right now?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, that gets written in a note and it gets talked about in the next working hours. And you just kind of respect that where someone else's capacity is. It doesn't necessarily mean that if I get into a flow state and I really want to work on something on a weekend or an evening, I absolutely can, but I can't expect Joe to want to do the same. And so it's just about the expectations of each other and respecting the default of those time periods.
Right, exactly. Something else we do is regular date nights. Having that on the calendar makes a really big difference for us. We have learned that is a really helpful way to be able to change environments, get out of, our typical workspace and connect with each other. And that is a really helpful way to prioritize each other. Um, is there anything else that we're missing? Is that it? Oh, I did have one other thought on that. We were talking with somebody else, and I made the comment to her that sometimes if you don't know how to connect with your partner or whoever it is outside of work, because you have been so focused on work, having hobbies or things that you're interested in and prioritizing yourself also helps with connecting with your partner. So I started, working out more, prioritizing hobbies that I'm excited about, reading novels I like, connecting with friends intentionally. And those all then become ways that Lyndon and I are able to connect on, because I'm really excited to tell him about something that happened when I was out doing my own thing, or update him on something that a friend and I bonded over. And those little things are what also help your relationship. So I'm just throwing that out there for anyone that needs that.
I think for context, for anyone that's never really thought about it, is oftentimes a pretty huge chunk of conversations that people have with their partners is, what did you do today? Mm-hmm. And then there's like popcorn thoughts that come out of that. We spend like 95% of our time together, or at least doing similar things in parallel. And so we already know what each other did during the day. Uh-huh. And so that whole category of conversation is gone. And so you have to be intentional of like, oh, I am going to find other things to talk about. Mm-hmm. Hobbies, interests, things you're learning. Mm-hmm. Pretty common one for us. Books we talk about all the time. Mm-hmm. And those are all great things.
Yeah.
I think the last, lesson 5, is more of a recent one. As you start making decisions or making big moves as a business, starting to think about how you align your dreams is actually pretty important.
Yeah, I'm going to push back. It's not recent. I remember us doing this in the first year that we worked together, because we realized from the get-go how helpful this would be for us. And it is like, we recenter on this regularly. So dreaming together is really, really helpful. One thing that we encourage all of our clients to do, especially couples, is dream about what does your wealthy life look like? And that's really helpful to do on your own. If you are working with your partner, really, really helpful to do separately, and then come together and talk about what came up in that exercise.
Can I give a little bit of framing on this question?
Yeah, please do.
Oftentimes people are like, I'm wealthy when I have money in the bank. Mm-hmm. That's money, or that's being rich. Mm-hmm. Wealthy is, what are the things you are able to do that money enables? And so this isn't necessarily have a conversation of like, I want $11 in the bank and you want 12 and we're completely misaligned. This is about like, what does your vacations look like? What does your weekly schedules look like? Yep. What does like the actual things you're doing look like in your wealthy life that are enabled by having money, not like the money itself?
Yeah. Where do you want to live? What do you want to experience? What do you want to be wearing? Who do you want to spend your time with? Like, it's get as specific as possible. What are the things you've always wanted to do that you've never felt like you could, or haven't given yourself permission for? Like, just dream and give yourself permission to dream and see what comes up. And then having those conversations together is so valuable. It's also really cool to hear what the other person wrote down and to see what you have in common on what you dreamt about. Because if you're living life together already, you probably already have some similar ideas of where you ultimately want to go. And continuing to learn about what the other has on their dream list that you may not have known about, that goes back to the connection piece. Like, you then learn something new about your partner that helps you know them even more. And then you get to align together on, what do we need to do in order to make this happen? And what does that path look like? Which is a whole other conversation, but it is really helpful to just, align together on what you want your dreams to be.
And also consistently check in on that, because dreams evolve. Mm-hmm. I think, why is this actually so important? It could feel like it's just like another way of connecting, but you heard us go through a whole section. Like, lesson 2 was roles and responsibilities. The thing that allows us to move faster is separating or decoupling decision-making authority. So as soon as you now have 2 brains making decisions about the future of your business, everything cascades. Like, if you've heard the phrase, like a butterfly flaps its wings
Mm-hmm.
and something happens. I don't actually know what the second half of that is. But it is like every little decision that each of us makes has a cascading effect on where our business is headed. And so if we are not aligned in our dreams of where we want to go, the little decisions that we independently make will lead us in separate directions and kind of lead to some problems in our business.
Yeah.
Talking from experience. And so having a monthly check-in, where's your dreams at? Where's my dreams at? Are we still aligned? Is there something that we're changing, modifying on this vision board, so that I then have, or we each have confidence of, I can make this decision knowing that we are headed in the same direction as our partner without having to be like, hey, what you feeling on this one today? Because there's an alignment at a meta level that then trickles down, that we have the independent authority to move faster in our own domains of the business.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more. All right. I think that's it. Those are the 5 biggest lessons we have learned after 5 years of working together, which is absolutely wild to say out loud. Fun fact, we have worked together more than half as long as we've been married. So in September, we'll actually celebrate 9 years being married. We've worked for 5 years, so that is more than half as I think I'm doing. Yes. So
we don't do public math.
Anyway, it has been really, really great. I would not trade it for anything. It is something I am so, so grateful that we took that leap to do together. And if that is something that you are interested in doing, it's going to take hard work. It's going to take a lot of conversations, learning how to communicate with each other. But if you are aligned on where you want to go and what the expectations are going into it, and you're willing to work together, it can be one of the most incredible experiences you will ever have. So if any of you are in that boat, you work together, or you're thinking about it, you're always welcome to reach out to us on Instagram if you have questions. Joe and Lyndon is our username. We are more than happy to just hear where you're at and answer any questions, because we know what it's like. So please feel free to. Otherwise, thank you for listening. You guys are incredible. We appreciate it. And we will see you on the next episode. Bye.